Welcome back to the big picture. And my guest tonight is a gentleman who I've been wanting to have a chat with for quite some time. I know how busy he is. Of course, it's one of those things. But let me just tell you a little bit about my guest. He began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and co workers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. You will get there, guys, and you realize how much this guy's done, what he's wrote. You'll figure who he is. He's a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and an author of more than, get this, 30 books and more than 100 articles about UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books are on Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including the Fate magazine, Atlantis Rising, which we know, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal magazine, UFO magazine, Mysteries magazine, Ufologist, even our own magazine, which is Phenomena magazine, and Outer Limits magazine, and others. His writing has been translated into several different languages, including German, Portuguese, French, and this one's unusual. Yeah, Icelandic. You don't get that very often. He is had appeared on numerous radio and television shows. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Daily Morning News, other newspapers. He's also taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. He currently resides on planet Earth and on an undisclosed forested location. Well, if you haven't already guessed who my guest is tonight, then you probably you should have done. It's Preston Dennett, who's been doing a considerable amount of work, 30 books. I mean, that's incredible. Since 1986, so you've been in the game for a long time, Preston.
Yeah, it's almost 40 years at this point. Not quite, but almost.
I started in '83, and I sort of shut away by telling people I've been at it for almost 41 years now. It's like, wow, where did the time go? It's a very obsessive subject, and
Oh, yeah.
it consumes you. It really, really does. Do you think, Preston, that after all the work you've done all over these years, you got a bit closer to some of the truths, from all the research and interviews you've done?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think there are still, of course, lots of questions surrounding what's going on here. But
Yeah.
after interviewing many hundreds of people, reading every book, as you can see, that I can get my hands on, and magazines and journals, and coordinating with other researchers, I think we've actually got a pretty good handle on what is happening, that we are being visited by ETs. I think that's what they are, extraterrestrials, people like us from other planets.
Yes.
I think we've got a pretty good idea why they're here, what to expect when someone's taken on board, and all these things.
I mean,
Not to say that there's not to say that there's still a lot of questions.
you really have to put in the time, though, don't you? I mean, there's no way you can jump into this subject and kind of think you might find it all out or recognize what things are and work things out. But you really do have to put the time in, and I admire you obviously doing this since 1986. It certainly takes a lot of work, especially writing 30 books as well. I mean, that's a lot. And I have to say, I have to take my hat off here that you've covered so many various subjects. Now, there's a lot of researchers out there that only lock down and specialize in certain areas, just study UFOs or paranormal. But you pretty much, you have such an extensive list of books. You pretty much covered a real lot of phenomena here, right across the whole scope, including the paranormal. So, one of the big questions that a lot of people are asking these days, Preston, is that, is there a connection between paranormal phenomena and UFO phenomena? And have you done some research in that area, Preston?
Yeah, I certainly have. I admire people who specialize in one subject and really try to ferret out the truth. But it became clear to me that there's so much to this. There's layers and layers. And very early on, I realized that there was a paranormal connection of some kind, because I would be interviewing people, and I got better at doing interviews and learning how to, not ask leading questions and things like this. I just leave it open-ended and say, has anything unusual happened to you?
Yeah.
And they knew, of course, I was interested in UFOs. So I'd get their UFO story, and people started very early on describing all kinds of encounters with what we call the paranormal, supernatural.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's normal, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It's not breaking the laws of the universe. We call it paranormal because we don't fully understand it. It's not accepted by
Not a
mainstream.
great term, is it, really?
Um,
You know,
but yeah, ghosts came up very early on, out of body experiences, and astral projection, and near death experiences.
yes,
But Bigfoot as well,
of course, Bigfoot. Yeah.
levitation, clairvoyance, precognition, healing. All these things started to come up, and it
Hmm.
became really confusing in the beginning.
I mean,
Because I'm like,
I understand that anybody can see a UFO, but when we're talking about, very unusual encounters that people have, there usually tends to be some type of indicator, through questioning that there's a string of things that they've had since childhood, maybe, or they've had paranormal encounters, or they've seen some strange things, like
yeah,
some unusual things. And it's interesting that the majority of people that have UFO experiences also have had those experiences as well. So it's seemingly something to do about how our consciousness is developed to be able to experience these phenomena. Would you agree?
and I think that's absolutely a pattern I see with contactees. It's a very rare contactee that doesn't have a wide variety of paranormal experiences. I
Mm,
think what's happening here, and it's kind of a two-way street, because ETs do seem to be attracted to people who have these kind of experiences.
yes.
But a close-up encounter with humanoids face to face, or an onboard experience, can sort of ignite these abilities in a person. I think what's happening is they're taken on board, they start communicating, it's telepathic. This is instantly, igniting your psychic abilities.
Mm,
You're suddenly using something all should have been using years ago.
yes.
Because these are natural human abilities. We all have them,
Mm,
whether it's astral projection or mediumship or all these things.
mm,
But when a person has these kinds of experiences and they're communicating with ETs and it's telepathic, I think this sort of wakes up this ability in a person. Because I see it all the time. Someone will have these experiences and come back and they start seeing shadow people, communicating
yes.
with ghosts, having astral projection. All these things come with it.
It's
It's
interesting.
important, I think, to
Yeah.
include these in people's accounts, because I know there's a lot of nuts and bolts folks out there who just want to prove UFOs are real and leave behind all the ghosts and
Well, yeah,
levitation.
that's it. I mean,
It's part of it.
in the early 80s, I mean, my mentors said to me, it's these things are traveling the vast distances of space to come to planet Earth. They're utilizing some unusual crafts with exotic engines or some type of advanced technology. And it's a very nuts and bolts phenomena. And and maybe they're here to to help us or help planet Earth. As time's gone on, we've started to question some of the aspects of that, such as are they traveling the vast distances of space? I'm looking at some of the recent reports. NASA did something last September, of last year, after doing some research. I mean, these specialists, they're aware that people are seeing UFOs. The military have got them and filmed them. These reports of them, these photographs of them. They'd be ignorant to it, to not accept the fact, that there are reality somewhere in regard, even in regarding data. But they said after conducting a thorough investigation that they found no evidence to support that these things were extraterrestrial. Interestingly, following suit was the Pentagon UAP program, Arrow, which pretty much concluded the same thing. Now, it's not the first time these things have been mentioned. I mean, going back to the late 60s, John Keel mentioned that he didn't believe they were extraterrestrial in the way we might consider them to be extraterrestrial. And also, Hynek mentioned it in 77 that he didn't really believe they were extraterrestrial in the way we would expect them to be. And Jacques Vallée also said the same thing. Um, we don't seem to see a super highway of traffic. Though we do have some things going on there for sure. We don't seem to see a super highway of traffic, considering the amount of UFOs that are seen on a regular basis around planet Earth. So, do you think the hypothesis of the extraterrestrials traveling from somewhere else has to be broken down a little better? I mean, how are they actually physically get to from there to here? Some people have theorized that we're talking about realities jumping in and out, into dimensions. What's your take on that, Preston? What do you think?
I do think they're coming from other star systems. I really do. I don't think they're traveling using a method we would use, propellants and so forth. Because having talked to a lot of contactees, it's clear that they travel what we would call interdimensionally.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
those three researchers you mentioned have put forth this theory
Oh
that
yeah.
they are not extraterrestrial, and several others, of course. This is, I would say, the second most popular theory of UFO origins. But I will say, I've got some questions for people who support that theory, because it doesn't explain the totality of evidence.
Yes.
It really doesn't.
Mm.
What are ET implants? Where are these coming from? What about the UFO crash retrieval reports? There's not just a couple of them, there's a lot of them. It's
Yes.
pretty apparent our governments have craft and ET bodies.
Mm.
I'm very curious about how these researchers would explain so many things, because they have no mechanism to explain how a metallic craft can appear out of basically nothing.
Mm.
Now, a lot of stuff does get put under the UFO umbrella that perhaps doesn't belong there. There
Yeah.
are other beings, fairies and little people, gnomes, elves, in cultures across the planet with accounts stretching back millennia.
Mm.
I suspect those are real, but not ET. And I don't conflate them together as some researchers do.
Yeah. Maybe that they might be utilizing some of the same methodologies of contact because
Yeah,
of
I mean,
this.
there's certainly commonalities between a lot of these reports,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean they're the same thing.
Mm. Yes, that's right. So
And
they
I
did.
will say that, researchers who specialize in onboard experiences, which is basically what I've been doing,
Mm.
but people like Barbara Lamb or
Yes.
Yvonne Smith, John Mack, David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, these people say, no, no, these are extraterrestrials. These are people, physical people like us.
Mm.
And we do all have interdimensional aspects too. So people are saying,
Yes.
oh, no, no, they're interdimensional. Well, we're interdimensional. That's
Oh,
not particularly useful. And
no,
they're not mutually exclusive.
that's
So
right.
you can be an extraterrestrial and still be interdimensional, just as we are.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, we have had a lot of compartmentalization between these subjects. I mean, at one point, the paranormal guys wouldn't deal with the UFO guys. UFO guys stayed in their camp, wouldn't deal with the paranormal guys. Do you think it's been a problem for us that we've had that compartmentalization? That if we're trying to look for something, that the answer might lie in another camp. I mean, for instance, Bigfoot and UFO incidents, for an example.
Yeah, I've got cases where Bigfoot and UFO intersect perfectly. It's an extremely small minority of cases, tiny percentage, but you still
Yeah.
have to explain it because there's 100 cases like this.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And
Yeah.
there is a connection, absolutely.
Mm.
But I think this is why I didn't want to just limit myself to just UFOs.
Yes.
I know that there's a lot going on here, and if you start excluding information, you're not going to get the truth.
Mm.
There's a
Exactly.
scientific method where you basically collect all the evidence and then you form your theory, not
Yeah.
vice versa, as
Oh,
so many
that'll be fun.
are doing. There's a
It's
lot
fun.
of what I call cherry picking and shoe fitting going on. People will
Well,
pick a
yeah.
theory and then look for cases to support it. And you can do
Yes.
that easily, but it's not true science.
No, no, it isn't. And there are a lot, and you're right. I mean, there are a lot of reported phenomena regarding cryptids, or if you want to call them that, and the subject of UFOs. We have more regular terminology. It's being utilized or bandied around so easily now is high strangeness. And in these locations, there tends to be what is described as kind of a cocktail of maybe paranormal or cryptid and UFO encounters, which we refer to. Interestingly, they tend to be in remote locations, you know. And I'm not talking just like Skinwalker Ranch and places like that. I'm talking, I mean, there are lots of places like that all over the world which have similar stories. to tell about these high strangeness incidents. And we have also in the UK, we've also got a location in the UK, which is very potent for that type of phenomenon, and still is continuing. But it's, it becomes very difficult to investigate because you've got so much strangeness and absurdity around this. It's like it's so strange and profound, some of these incidents, it's hard to have people believe them. I mean, it's so strange and profound.
Well, I think we only call it strange because we don't understand it. What is strange? And strange is, in essence, by definition, is something that very rarely happens.
Yes.
It's out of our worldview. But if you look at these cases and you really study it, it's a lot more common than people realize. The vast majority of people don't talk about it.
Mm.
In one of my books, I titled it Humanoids in High Strangeness because I really wanted to embrace it. And I know for a fact that a lot of researchers are editing and censoring people's stories. They will tell what they, basically believe in or feel credible,
Yeah.
and are not putting it all in. And if I may give you an example, I was interviewing this gentleman, Ron Johnson, who lived in Texas, who he and his little brother, they were kids, were being visited by blue beings. These little short blue beings, which I've heard described many times,
Yes.
as well as grays.
Yes.
And they would wake up sometimes and they would be in each other's beds, switched places, but they were wrapped up in their sheets, like a tortilla thing, all wrapped up like a Tootsie Roll.
Yeah.
And the parents would come in like, how did, they were so tightly wrapped, they couldn't get out. So they're flopping around like, earthworms trying to get out. And the parents would say, how did you do this? And they would, of course, say, well, we didn't. It's the little blue men. We keep telling you. Their parents did not believe them. This is very strange. And it was so interesting to me because I had other cases of this.
Yes.
One lady, she described how her quilt was wrapped up like a Tootsie Roll and tucked under the mattress and put over her chest so she couldn't get up.
Right.
Very odd. And, I put that case in the book, and another gentleman whose chapter is also in the book read the book. He's like, I'm so sorry I didn't tell you this. I didn't even think. But that exact thing, I would wake up and I would be all wrapped up in my sheet. So this is something I think they're doing. I don't know exactly why. I'm guessing. Of course, I can't know for sure. I'm only speculating.
Yes.
But to leave a calling card, a little, it's almost a humorous way of saying we were here.
Yeah,
but it's very strange. And a lot of people don't talk about it because they think, well, no one's ever going to believe this.
Well, exactly. I mean, it does go back some time, actually. I mean, I know that Blue Book officers back in the day, I mean, everything was about, just making it look like they were doing something for the general public by public demand. But it wasn't really, it was pretty much fruitless, most of it. But nevertheless, though, they made great effort to go out and see, for an example, Mrs. Brown seeing a UFO. And they did ring up the newspapers and say, oh, we're going to see Mrs. Brown at 2:00. And all the press would be there, so make it looks like it looks really good that they pulled up and got the satchels and the uniforms on, and they're doing a grand job for the US. And there have been a couple of incidents, because you can see this on the full documents that have been released. You can read through some of these. For instance, Mrs. Brown said, "Oh yes, I had this UFO encounter. I had this experience, me and my husband." And for the following week, though, we had like ghostly activity taking place in the home, strangely. And the Blue Book officer said, "Oh no, we don't want the ghosty stuff. Let's just stick to the UFO facts." So even then, he was that kind of, don't mix that with this, and it wasn't, people didn't put many connections of those dots together, that some people that have paranormal experiences are usually those people that have, UFO experiences more so than not. And I think it's something later, it came along and we kind of realized, well, now we're getting full details about not just the experience of the UFO, but, other things that they've experienced. We start to make a picture that these people are experiencers of phenomena, and there are various things in that category. Have you interviewed people like that yourself, Preston?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think any scientific discipline starts to become a little bit of a closed system because anything that doesn't fit what we believe to be the current paradigm is rejected.
Mm.
For example, in the beginning of UFO research, almost all researchers rejected any accounts involving humanoids. This was not really accepted at all. Neither were crash retrievals. And paranormal aspects had the same thing.
Yes.
One lady I interviewed, she had a really dramatic example of this. She had an experience with these silver-suited humanoids who came into her bedroom. This is in Mount Rainier, Washington, and woke up the next morning on top of her covers, which was really hard to explain. Her bed was made, so this was odd. And she was feeling a little disoriented, a little dissociated, but goes to work. And as soon as she turns on her computer, it blows out mysteriously. She's like, okay, well, something happened. She goes to the copier to make some copies. She calls the IT guy, fix my computer. So he's working on her computer and she's trying to make copies and blows out the copier machine. And she's like, oh, sorry, IT guy, as soon as you're done there, can you fix this? And she goes to do a fax, back in the days when we had fax machines.
Yeah.
And she blew that out. So it became clear to her that there was something
Yes.
about her, maybe her bioelectric field that was
Mm.
affecting machinery. I've talked to so many contactees who say, I can't wear watches. I'm burning out light bulbs, TVs, radios fuzz up when I walk by them. I've got
Yeah.
many, many cases of this. One guy, a Marine, he was a welder working at an auto factory, and his superiors called him in and demanded he undergo a physical examination because he kept blowing out this very expensive welding machine.
Oh, right.
And also, he described the same sort of things,
Do you
blowing
know?
out light bulbs and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
What did they discover though? Do you know what they discovered? Did he have a test done?
They couldn't find anything unusual about him.
So,
However, his dentist did. His
oh,
dentist did find what appears to be an implant in his jaw.
oh,
Uh,
right.
I've got a number of cases of that. Many actually have implants or
Yeah.
suspected implants.
They're very unusual. I mean, from the research I've looked into, seems to be a various types of these devices. Some of them seem to be, some type of technology. Some of them seem to be meteoric. Some of them might even be biological. I'm not too sure, but there seems to be a variety of these things. No scars on the body, so that we often wonder how they ended up inside people. And I had a lengthy discussion with Devil Sims not too long ago about his work, and he mentioned about that utilizing black light in locations because there are sometimes marks left on the abductees or the clothing that is not visible within the visual spectrum, but you see it through black light, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of cases of that, but it does come up. I'm
Yeah,
certainly aware of it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, do you find any, why certain people are having those experiences, or do you think it is purely random?
Well, in terms of people, having contact, there are absolute patterns. Because I looked into it after, building my own database of several hundred cases. Thought, let's do a statistical analysis. There's got to be something here. And of course, one pattern that is immediately apparent is one that many researchers have commented on, which is this is generational. This
Yeah.
It does appear to follow certain family lines.
Mm.
And I've got several cases going 3, 4 generations back or more. So I would say most contactees have
Yeah.
this in their family. So there's something going on there.
Right.
But that's not always the case. There's, people driving down a highway at night. It seems somewhat opportunistic in
Mm.
other cases.
Yes.
Uh, and we already mentioned psychic ability. A lot of these contactees display these various psychic abilities, which is an absolute pattern.
Yes. Yeah.
It's evenly divided between men and women in my files. I mean, 50-50. People
Right.
very young, people quite elderly, people of all ancestries, Black, white, Asian, Native American, Latino, they all are having experiences.
Right. Are these locations? Is there any significance about the location where these people live? Are they in remote locations, or are they, in cities, or
Got cases in very urban areas, cases in very rural areas. Over 50% are suburban, which makes sense because if you look at where people are living, over 50% live in suburban areas.
Yes. So it
So
doesn't
that
really
didn't
matter
prove,
then.
yeah, it didn't prove very useful. There was a slight uptick in cases where people live in what we would term UFO hotspots, areas of high activity.
Mm.
But there was many cases where people, that did not seem to make sense. But I did find one very interesting pattern when I started investigating UFO healing cases,
Oh,
because I
right.
was really interested in that. It was being underreported. It was the subject of my first book. I found many, many cases. I found 100
Right.
very quickly,
Yeah.
and now well over 400 cases. I had to put out another book because of this. And I will say it's far more common than people realize. Every major researcher, almost without exception, has these cases.
Yes.
Bud Hopkins, John Mack, Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith, David Jacobs, Brad Steiger. I mean, I can go down a very big list. Philip Mantle, Timothy Good.
Yes.
Uh, they've all got them.
So they were healed. An illness, any severe illnesses?
Oh yeah, yeah. Right across the board. It can be something as simple as a head cold or a cut on the finger or nearsightedness or farsightedness or uh, stomach ache, a bad back,
Right.
kidney stones, uh, hepatitis. I mean, it's pretty much everything. Arthritis,
Right.
serious
And
illnesses,
did, did,
diabetes.
did he recall that they went through some procedure to be healed, or is it just an after thing from the event that they realized there's some difference?
Many people do recall the details. Not everybody. Some will have an experience and then don't really remember much of it at all, but come
Right.
back and, wow, my arthritis is gone.
Right. And do you
Many
think?
are struck by a beam of light.
Well, I was just going to say that. Do you think it's something? It's a psychological process that they're being healed, or do you think it's a physiological process, or maybe
It's,
both?
I believe it's primarily physiological. Not to say that there aren't people cured of, suicidal ideation,
Yes.
depression, these sort of things, because that does come up.
Mm.
But there was a case that I was just looking into recently, another healing case. There's so many of these. People have no idea. Involving a couple from, I believe this was Peru, driving along a mountain road
Right.
and had a craft come down and land in front of their pickup truck, blocking the way. They were both very frightened when two human-looking ETs, presumably ETs, step out and start to approach and the ETs laid their hands on the couple's back.
Mm.
And they felt great heat. The woman was so frightened she passed out. I mean, she could not take it. The husband was, basically paralyzed in fright. And that was it. That was the encounter. It was very brief, 3 minutes tops. ETs went back into their craft, but the the couple both suffered from arthritis, but not after this encounter.
That's
So this
interesting.
was apparently a hands-on healing,
And
which is unusual.
yeah,
10% of the cases are apparently done through what we would call hands-on healing, but most are technological. People will be visited in their bedroom, perhaps, or struck by a beam of light while walking outside or driving. More serious cases, because there's like 30 involving people allegedly healed of cancer or tumors being removed or
yes.
diphtheria, you name it.
Mm.
They're taken on board and given a fairly lengthy procedure
And
involving.
do you think these are all those varied intelligences, entities, or these beings with different agendas and things? Because there are also other incidents around the world where, things haven't been, very good. People have been injured, or, sometimes worse, apparently, according to certain reports, in Brazil and other places. I mean, do you think that there are just different agendas and things doing different things to different people for certain reasons? Or do you think it's just like kind of all one thing and just like anybody on the street that you'd meet. Are they good? Are they bad? What are their intentions? We don't know.
Right. We have to be very careful. We have to be very discerning here. Let me just backtrack a little bit in terms of, who's being healed and why, and who's having contact. So I was interviewing this lady from Norway who had an experience where she was healed of chronic back pain. And she had no prior encounters, no history in her family, no reason to have this kind of experience that I could pinpoint. She didn't have psychic experiences. This seemed very random, and yet it was very specific. Greys came in, healed her using an instrument I've heard described by others.
Mm.
And finally, I asked her, "What's your job? What do you do for a living?"
Yeah.
She said she's retired. She used to be a graphics artist, but now she's very active in her community in Norway, doing human and animal rights.
Oh.
And that rang a bell for me because I just interviewed a gentleman who fights against racism. And I thought of another case. Well, this guy's a social worker. And I started looking at my cases.
Yeah.
And they're involving doctors and nurses, teachers, artists, musicians, inventors, environmentalists, social workers, people who are doing good work for humanity in some capacity.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was absolutely a pattern.
Because some of these incidents are so short, it sounds as if that was the whole reason for this incident, was to do that.
Yeah, healing is a major part of the ET agenda. I don't like that word agenda because it sounds negative, but one of their main goals, and this is demonstrable. Don't believe me. Go to the firsthand cases. People say, well, no, some people are being hurt. I've looked into these cases, and I can tell you in terms of injuries, people often will point to the Betty or Cash Landrum incident, Huffman, Texas.
Yeah.
That was a reverse engineered craft. Most researchers now believe that was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And others what about Stephen McCalloch in Falcon Lake, Canada? He walked up to a landed UFO.
Probably
not a good idea because there was a number of cases of this.
Oh, clearly this goes back in time, a long, long time. I mean, if we look through the history, ancient history, it seems that there's been interactions with these beings, various different beings, for a long, long time. I mean, we don't even know how far it goes back, to be honest. I mean, to be fair, we could even say it could go back before we were even documenting,
Yeah, I think so.
So
we can see that from cave paintings and, all the way to Middle-Age wood carvings. The Romans called them flying shields.
That's right. Yes.
They go way, way back. We know this.
Yeah, so it's not a new phenomenon. I mean, initially people used to think that it's kind of birthed itself around about the flying saucer era times, the 1950s. No, it kind of goes back a long time on that. I mean, I'm sure that there has been interest in regarding our technology and the things that we were doing, such as atomic bomb tests, and caught their attention on many occasions. Our nuclear capabilities, our weapons, our military bases, and things like that. I'm sure they are the watchers. They seemingly watch everything, even apparently skirmishes and wars that have taken place. They seemingly have been onlookers, and either side thinking that must be theirs.
Yeah, and this is another argument, I think, for the ET explanation of the origins of all this. Because why would an interdimensional spiritual being be hovering over mines, hydroelectric dams, nuclear power stations, air bases, prisons even? I've done research into all these different cases of what we would call UFO attractors.
Oh, I never realized prisons.
Yeah, I've got cases all over the world. I looked into it. It was amazing. And if you look at a prison, of course, you'll see a lot of high technology there with searchlights and electrified fences and very fortified buildings. So ETs seem to be very interested in anything, certainly nuclear, but anything involving any sort of technology. In fact, Jim and Coral Lorenzen, pioneering researchers, noticed this very early on. and they said, well, there's a factory being built over there. We bet that there will be sightings as soon as that thing is completed over this factory. And they were right.
Oh, right.
So this is, I think, a clear indication that ETs are watching over our technology. If you look into the cases of rocket launches, I did a whole chapter on this in one of my books. They are there every time looking over the rocket launches. And of course, the Apollo and Gemini missions have a lot of reports there.
There is a lot of reports. Are you an advocate of the CE5 initiative, the process, communications that way?
Yeah, certainly. I think
Have you been
that
involved in them, Preston?
I have, yeah, from very early on.
Right.
In fact, I I don't take any credit for starting this movement because it's been going on for many, many years.
Yes.
But I did play a little tiny role in it, which
Right.
was really cool because I had investigated this case in Santa Monica, California, where a gentleman was working with NBC, and were doing a publicity stunt. They had set up lights in the shape of a peacock's tail, the NBC logo,
Yes.
with colored lights. It looks very much like a disc, a half disc. And they turned it on, and 3 UFOs came zooming down to investigate. So
Oh,
I interviewed this gentleman, Arnie Weiler, who was there. And he turns to the special effects guy, Rick Liebert, and says, "Look, UFOs." And Rick Liebert says, "Oh yeah, this happens all the time when I'm doing these publicity stunts." So I'm like, "I need to talk to you, Rick Liebert. Give me his number." And I talked to him, and he described another event in downtown San Diego, on what was then the tallest building in San Diego, 1978, where they set up a green argon laser to play in beat to a music radio station.
oh, right.
And that called down a UFO. So I wrote this article calling all UFOs for UFO Universe magazine.
Right. So they're obviously interested. They're curious.
And Stephen Greer formed CSETI,
Hmm.
and he used those 2 cases in his book. And he says, these are the cases that really woke me up to, you can call down UFOs. So I spoke with him
Yes.
about this. He was very complimentary. And he came to LA where I was living and formed a CSETI chapter, Center for Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He spearheaded the whole CE5 movement.
Right.
And
Right.
we called down UFOs over a period of 5 years, probably a half dozen times.
Hmm.
And it was really exciting. I do recommend it because I think it's got great potential in 3 main areas. One, you can move from studying UFO reports to studying UFOs,
Yes.
live field work. It's a big difference.
Yes.
Another thing is you can bring in people who have never seen a UFO. It gives them the opportunity to see one.
Hmm.
That's awesome. But
Yes.
really, the greatest potential is to open up some sort of interaction, some sort of relationship. I mean, the potential to be, go on board ultimately and have an interactive, ongoing relationship with ETs is, I mean, you cannot underestimate the potential of that.
No.
It's
The subject of UFOs crosses various different areas, one of which is USOs, and I know that you've been involved in conducting research on those. Where did you focus your studies when it came to USOs? Was it off the coasts of the US?
it was, being based right outside of LA
Yes.
very early on. Some of my first cases were USOs,
Mm.
and they started adding up quite a bit. Uh,
Yeah.
right off the Southern California coast in the Santa Catalina San Pedro Channel. I started getting a lot of cases. And I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And I'd started writing books after about 10 years of research.
Mm.
And finally, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write UFOs over California. We need to document all these cases that are going to be lost to posterity if nobody does this.
Yes.
So I wrote a chapter in that book about ocean-going UFOs. And then I started getting asked to speak on the radio and conventions. I got pulled onto TV, and it just started snowballing. And I became sort of the go-to guy for USOs.
Yes, I
So
noticed. I'd seen a lot of the stuff that you'd done was on the subject of USOs.
Yeah, and which is so fascinating because I mean a UFO is a USO. They're the same thing. But it's you can't really call it a UFO, can you? Not flying. And it's so we call them USOs, unidentified submersible objects. But there's a lot of cases. And I have
Yeah.
to tell you, mile for mile, that area off the Southern California coast is one of the top producers. All the researchers there have cases. I
Yes.
ended up documenting some 150 in that area alone. And it's
Does seem
fascinating
very
stuff.
potent, that location, isn't it, for those type of incidents? There seems to
Yeah,
be a
it
lot
is
of.
worldwide. It is absolutely worldwide, but there are certain areas that seem to be particularly active.
Mm.
Boy, I've
Yeah.
gotten some great cases. One of my favorite, if I may,
Yeah.
uh,
Sure.
involved a gentleman, an electrician's mate on the USS Clamagore, a submarine, a Navy submarine. And it was not known at the time, and this is 1971, I think 72, that the Clamagore was carrying nuclear-tipped torpedoes. This was classified information. And this gentleman, Ray Sachs is his name, just, he's getting along in years. He wanted to do his part for disclosure. And he said he was on this submarine, the Clamagore, going up the East Coast one evening, 6 or 7 miles offshore, heading north at about 12 knots. They were on the surface. He was on lookout with another petty officer. The commander was on deck as well as the second in command when a USO showed up. And he said it came very fast, at about 100 knots from the stern and started pacing the Clamagore just, 100 yards left, actually, next to the submarine. Anything that approaches within a quarter mile is considered a near miss at sea. This does not happen. It would be considered an accident. So this could not be another submarine. And they could see that it wasn't. It was a round light just below the surface. And of course, they go to the sonar room. It was Ray's job to be in contact with the sonar, and they couldn't see it.
Oh.
So they, of course, no, they wanted to come up on deck and take a look. They can see it visually, but it's not painting on sonar at all. And the higher ranking officers, of course, came up to look at it as well. It followed them for 15 minutes,
Right.
which is quite totally silent. It was no hostile action or anything like this. Then it darts off, still quite fast, faster than any sub can go, in another direction. And the
Yes.
second in command turns to the commander and says, "Sir, how would you like to report this in the logbook?" And the commander says, "Officers who report this kind of event do not move up in rank." So it was not recorded. And I've
Uh,
talked to other Navy officers, and they're like, "Yes, this happens all the time. We never record it."
yeah. There
Uh,
must be a lot
I
then.
have to think that this USO showed up because the Clamagore was carrying nuclear torpedoes. They're very concerned, the ETs, about our use of nuclear material in any capacity.
Mm. Do you get many reports from officials regarding their experiences?
I'm not going to say many. The vast majority are, and I hate to say ordinary citizens because we're all special in our own way. We all do our part.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've talked to people from every level of societies: submarine navigator, some pilots, certainly,
Uh,
doctors, lawyers, police officers,
yeah.
teachers, nurses, secretaries, housewives, people from, you name it, bus drivers. When you start to, add it up, the hundreds of people you've interviewed, you cover pretty much the entire spectrum of society. Even
Mm.
some very famous people. They wouldn't talk to me, but they were involved in some of these cases. Very,
Yes.
very famous celebrities.
Mm. Well, when I talked to a number of specialists at the higher level in regarding when ATIP came out and talked about the transmedium capabilities of these crafts flying through the air, underwater, and to be able to be probably move through space. They listed it as transmedium travel. However, there was another one noted, which is kind of quad medium capabilities, but they didn't put the details out because at the time they were putting the information out, I was told, they wanted to obtain as much scientific assistance as they possibly could. And they didn't want to reveal the fourth medium because it's problematic. And that it was some of these crafts are seen to go into volcanoes into hillsides, into mountains, to seemingly pass through solid matter, be able to disappear into them. And they were very aware of that, Preston, but they didn't want to list that at this time because I suppose it is a bit of a difficult one to drop onto the lap of a scientist in regarding the physics that might be involved here, for them to be able to do so. Have you looked into them? Are you aware of those cases where they seemingly going into physical matter?
I've got those kinds of cases very early on, set me up in a kind of a quandary. I'm like, how am I going to deal with this? And I decided, I just have to report this. This is what people described.
Yes.
And, people need to be honest about what people are saying and report it, because there are a lot of cases of this. People will describe a UFO not hovering over the house, but coming into it. One guy I interviewed basically said UFO came into his house and pulled him out that way. I've got a number of reports of this. Not a lot, but it certainly does happen. UFOs moving through trees into the ground.
Yes. Yes.
Coming out of the ground.
Very
And the fact is they come into the water at very high speeds, and they're not, sometimes they make a splash, but often they don't.
No, sometimes you don't leave a water, do they?
Anything we have that would hit the water that hard. I was in a seaplane once and landed on the water. It feels like cement. Boom, boom, boom. It really does.
You do feel it. I mean, there's been video footage of UFOs that are seemingly entering the water, but not leaving any wakes. And these UFOs that are not leaving no sonic booms or no air disturbance when they come close to other air.
Well, they've overcome that. And I think this is why some people are saying, well, this is not ET, because look at they're seeming to defy the laws of physics. They're turning invisible. They're turning at right angles. They're going into solid objects. They're going into volcanoes. Could this be something else? I think that's an assumption. And what we are not taking into consideration is how truly advanced ETs are.
Yes, the capabilities.
So I think that, as study the reports, I think I would always encourage people not to go to our governments for answers. Because they're not telling the truth.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
Go to the contactees. That's where we're getting pretty much everything we can really rely on.
Yeah, well, we do have a lot of entities during these type of contact cases that are seemingly walk through the walls or go through the ceiling. So
precisely.
Yeah, and yet can hold you or reach out and grab you, but at the same time can also physically walk through a wall. So it seems like they have the capabilities of metaphysical. That they can be physical.
Yeah. We have these abilities too. Apparently, because I've studied this. I've studied, I read Butler's Lives of the Saints.
All right, well, tell me a bit about that, Preston. That's interesting.
Because people are like, well, these ETs are, spiritual entities if they're walking through walls. Well, we are spiritual entities, and there are people on this planet. I wrote a book called Human Levitation.
Yes.
I started looking into this. Human levitation by people who are not associated with UFOs is very well documented. There are well over 300, 400 cases reaching back millennia, 3,000 years, up to the current day. It's been filmed, it's been photographed, it's been widely witnessed, and it's been proven in a laboratory setting at least a half dozen times. In front of prominent scientists, Nobel Prize winners and really high-profile scientists have witnessed this. Human levitation is a real thing. And there are cases of mediums like Carmine Mirabelli, Brazil's greatest medium, who walked through a wall. There's a case in England.
I heard of that, yeah.
The Janet Harper, a very famous haunting.
Yes.
Case by Guy Lyon Playfair. He wrote a book about it called This House is Haunted. Janet Harper reportedly went right through the wall during this haunting.
Yeah.
And it was a controversial aspect. I'm glad they reported it because there are other cases of this, of people seeing solid objects come through their ceilings.
Yes.
Apports. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So these are little clues as to what's going on with ET, because the contactees who are taken on board basically say, and I'm going to reference one of my favorite contactee cases, Dolly Saffron, who is a fully conscious contactee. I wrote a book, Symmetry, about her experiences. because she was able to really explain a lot of things. She doesn't need hypnosis.
Mm.
She's overcome fear. She's had hundreds upon hundreds of contacts with ETs, and they taught her how to pilot the craft, which sounds crazy, but I have other
Mind,
cases. Yeah,
yes,
it's all psychic. Their technology is very much psychically integrated,
right.
and they themselves are very advanced psychically. So it's going back to what you said, it's all about consciousness.
Mm.
And so people are going on board these craft and seeing all these things that seem symbolic or magical and very high strangeness. And this is pointing people towards, looking for other explanations to explain this. When really, as Arthur C. Clarke said, anything that's sufficiently advanced technology is going to look like magic to someone who doesn't understand it.
And it's absolutely true.
And we're seeing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think in some of the official documents, when some of these programs were looking into the UFO phenomena at high government levels, they even made references like magic, weird science and freaky magic was the terminology, WSFM, which we used. Took a while to try and figure out what that WSFM meant, but it was nothing more than just a terminology of weird science and freaky magic, because they just thought a lot of the stuff was really so profound, they didn't really know what to call it.
Right.
A lot of
So
people,
yeah, I mean, there's, like I said, there's still lots of questions that need answering.
there really is.
I will say experiencers in general, the vast majority of them who've had repeated contact feel it is ET.
yes.
And who would know the answers better than who has experienced it? And a lot of these researchers who are positing these theories are not experiencers.
Mm.
Now, I've seen UFOs myself. I've had direct experiences with them.
Did you have
So
experiences prior to being interested? Is that what did you have?
no, not really. Well, it's in my family. I did discover that. So,
Yeah.
and there's some clues that I may have, but nothing that I can really point to that I'm going to say, I know for certain that I've been having contact. But when I started researching this, and I was quite young, 21, it was not long after I started having sightings.
Oh yes.
Not just for two, but quite a
Yes.
few.
Yeah, Gary Nolan stated recently, actually, because when I was been monitoring Gary Nolan's work for quite some time since he came onto the scene, he's had so they're quite skeptical initially. Started to look into the problems in regarding certain pilots that might come in very close proximity to some of the phenomena, which might have some adverse effects on them. And he's been doing some tests on that. It really intrigued him to the point where I think it was about 3 months ago, I looked at one of his most recent interviews, and he openly said that, since I got into this subject and done this research, I started having some experiences, and I thought that's interesting. It's as if like it's a bit like a faith apparitions, isn't it? Because you have to have the faith to have him. It's like believing is seeing, and what he's saying is because suddenly he had got an interest in his subject and started to believe a little bit more about it, started to open himself to being able to experience some of this phenomenon. So in some cases, it's like believing is seeing as opposed to seeing is believing.
Well, I'm not sure I'm willing to go there. There's something really interesting going on because I think what happens is a lot of skeptics are very good at denial, very good at explaining away, very good at compartmentalizing, and might have already had some experiences, but are not going to look at it.
Yeah, I mean,
But I will say,
yeah, I mean, if you look at religious experiences,
yeah, but there
those
there is
people
this
have to have.
phenomena called UFO investigators disease, coined by researcher I forget his name, Ed Conroy, that's right, who
Yeah,
was investigating Whitley Strieber's experiences.
right,
Ed Conroy was a mainstream journalist,
right. And what is
and
that?
Whitley, I think what's happening is it's sort of a simple case of the tables being turned. If you express an interest in ETs, they're going to express an interest in you.
Right.
Ed Conroy, ch challenged Whitley Strieber, says, you know what, I'm going to investigate your case. Are you open to that? But if I find it's a hoax, I'm going to say it. Of course, he came away convinced, but started having experiences. And I
Mm.
looked into this because he says, well, this is actually a thing he found out. And I found a number of researchers, many, many of them, who experienced this as well. Virginia Aronson, she started investigating UFO healings because she was intrigued by the book I wrote. And she contacted me. She's like, I have to tell you, I started having experiences after I started researching this. I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised. A lot of researchers find this out, you know, the hard way. uh,
You
and
do.
quite a few of them are having experiences and keeping quiet because we want to remain objective.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a thing. There's no doubt about it.
Mm. I noticed that you probably looked into the cryptid phenomena as well. I mean, it's hard to not to sometimes. Um, and I did consider about research in Ohio regarding some of the cryptid phenomena, which is very different. A lot of the cryptid phenomena there, they talk of werewolves and dogmen. And there's been some very credible experiences where these things have been seen, they've pursued people, scared them half to death, of course. But on occasion, when they really have come face to face with these things, or they've fallen over and this thing's caught up, in none of those cases has these creatures acted like a predator. At that point when the game is up and you can't seemingly, do anything else, they seemingly just run off. After looking a little bit confused as to what next. I think it seems like the whole process is about scaring them, fear. Have you done any research or looked into any of those sort of things, Preston?
Certainly have. I avoided Bigfoot for a long time because I was afraid it might be real. And this was going to open up a can of worms. And I was already dealing with a lot. But of course, my first UFO slash Bigfoot case came along and had to follow the story where it leads you and ended up becoming a Bigfoot researcher. I don't specialize that so much, but I wrote a book about it. I've interviewed a lot of people. I've got my Bigfoot books. It is real. There is a cover up very similar to the UFO cover up because it challenges mainstream anthropology.
Yes.
And it's strange that, science becomes such a closed system and will not accept these reports, even though there's absolute validity to them.
Well,
And
yes.
I started getting, I got a couple of Dogman reports well before, this was popularized by largely Linda Godfrey,
Yes.
who The Beast of Bray wrote. She wrote this book, which did quite well. I contacted her and did an interview with her and was very impressed because I had two cases I was sitting on. I'm
Right.
like, I wasn't sure if I found them credible or not because I need at least three.
Well,
I
yes.
had two.
I mean, here in the UK, we have hundreds of those cases. It's so very, very widespread.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think, with Bigfoot, they can be very territorial and scare the
Well,
living daylights
yeah,
out of you. They're not necessarily hurting people,
yeah,
but we see
we have,
this.
we have
Yeah.
in the UK, but we have them in places which is a small town, and it's seen in a park, a very small park surrounded by houses, and several witnesses. They heard it chattering as well, which is an interesting thing. Um, Very credible cases, and yet there's no place for a Bigfoot to hide in the UK, really. Not in the urban areas. And we think to ourselves, well, if someone's uncharacteristic for an animal of that size, and or even to be there, that it's got to be something very, very strange.
I mean, there's a lot of countryside in the UK.
Oh yeah, there is, but I mean, I'm talking Manchester, I'm talking Bolton, I'm talking built-up urban areas where this thing has been seen in a park at night by several witnesses, and not just one of those type of incidents. There's been quite a number of those urban incidents. You
I've
think,
got a few myself. I think some of these have an interdimensional aspect because
hmm,
there's quite a few reports of Bigfoot and other cryptozoological creatures disappearing in front of somebody,
yeah,
literally disappearing.
yes, I'm
So
reports of that, and we've had reports from people who are absolutely certain that this thing is only several feet from them. You can see the bushes moving. You can hear its breathing. They know it's a very large creature that's been pursuing them, but they cannot see it. it's invisible to them. And incidents like that lead me to believe, yes, there may be some interdimensional aspect to it, which would leave us it becomes very problematic because in some cases they can leave physical traces and scat and hair and damage and footprints and things. And at the same time, they can seemingly just vanish, and that's the real problem.
Which harkens back to all the cases of fairies and elves and gnomes and kobolds who are wearing, suits with little buttons on them and hats and maybe a pipe and all these. It's like, well, this is really odd. Where are these little fairy towns? Are they in a fourth dimension or something? I'm leaning towards this because I thought this was a historical phenomenon. It's not. It is still going on. There are
Oh yeah.
modern reports of this.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, I've done quite a considerable amount of work with my colleague Barry Fitzgerald in Ireland, and that stuff is still going on. The Fae are still there, and you can still experience these things, and they're very, very strange, and they don't make any sense. But there are whole towns which know this. Very unusual small towns of people living in them in Ireland. They know about the Fae. They don't they don't intertwine with them. They don't try and upset them. And they live their lives like that, and they're very aware that these places are around. They don't seem easily talk to many outsiders when they come and talk about certain things, but
No, why would you? Because you know how hostile the subjects are
yeah,
in terms of
I think it
skeptics.
was only about 53 years ago the last town in Ireland curfewed end, and that was around about 10 o'clock at night because the Fae come out at night and they used to encourage curfews. And I think it was only about 53 years ago the last curfew ended for a small town in Ireland. So that went on for quite some time.
I put out an episode about elves or fairies or ETs on my YouTube channel
Hmm.
because I had interviewed this gentleman who in Colorado as a young child had an experience with what he insists is an elf. And he described what we often hear, a short little being wearing a brown
Yeah.
kind of jacket, trousers, boots, bald, very large round eyes, came through the wall, interacted very playfully with him. This happened a half dozen times. Once there were two of them, and he ended up moving away. He asked them to follow. They said, we live in this area. We cannot leave. But he insists this was real. And I put his account up on my YouTube channel, along with a couple of other. I got a huge response from people who's like, I'm so glad you put this up because I had this experience and it was recent, some of them.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm
It's
like,
not. It's
wow.
still going on. It still gets reports.
And this is across the US, people think, oh, it's only in Scandinavian countries or, Ireland or UK. No, no, no. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it does seem to be. People do report them in other countries as well. When you do the research, you can find them. There are obviously concentrations of things in other areas, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Out of the books that you have wrote, Preston, what sort of subject did you enjoy the most? What do you find the most intriguing about of all the things that you've actually worked
Oh, well, you should ask me to choose between my babies. I love them all. But I have to say, the schoolyard cases
in? Ah, right. Now that's a
really
top.
intrigued me because this was, not too long ago. I'd
Yeah,
been in this field for some 30 years. And of course, heard about the Rua Zimbabwe case, didn't really connect the dots. The Rua Zimbabwe case, of course, being Ariel Elementary School,
mm,
where a UFO landed and 200 kids were on the playground and at least 60 saw the craft, a smaller group saw ETs.
yes,
It's a very well-known case.
it is
Anyone who's in this field knows of it. But, well, that's certainly an interesting case because there's the Westall High School case in Melbourne, Australia.
very similar. Yeah,
Yeah, 1966, some 400 students and teachers saw the craft landed next to the school. I thought, well, isn't this interesting? Because there's a case which happened 1 year to the day after Westall in Opelika, Florida, at
yeah,
Crestview Elementary. Same exact thing. Students and teachers saw it. The UFO landed next to the playground.
yes.
And of course,
Oh,
the
it was,
very,
yeah, Broadhaven was another one, wasn't it?
yeah, that's my next one. I started thinking about. I'm like, well, Broadhaven in Wales.
Exactly.
I think it was
Quite,
1977.
quite a lot, actually, when you
And I
start.
started looking into this, and I found over 100 cases.
Yes, I actually have one
Um,
myself. When I took over an organization which has been running since 1973, which is called MAPIT, Manchester's Aerial Phenomenon Investigation Team, it's still running today. It's the second longest running organization in the UK dealing with the subject of UFOs. And I adopted, when I took over in 1989, I kind of adopted the file system. I was looking through, and there's a case in there from 1974, and it was an incident that took place at a school in Reddish in Stockport in the UK, where on this case there was a landed craft that came down in the school playing fields. Where there was a bit
like
of
they do. Yep.
and in this case, the gentleman, though, considering it's 1974, the gentleman was dressed in a one-piece silver suit with boots on and looked a bit like like a 19 sort of 50s, 60s rock band. Long hair, silver gloves, silver suit, belt, you know, it, and quite a few children saw this. And he was collecting plant samples apparently. And when he caught sight of him, he rushed off back to the craft, and the craft took off, and so on and so forth. But it was an interesting incident from 1974. And very, and when you talk about the how he looked, is very befitting to the time. It's 1974. And that's a sighting that happened, and quite a number of people saw it. So, that was another one really that you don't get to hear them much, but we had one on file, which I thought, because I saw your book when it came out, and I thought, very good, because I've got one of these stories myself. Now, let me tell you that a number of years ago, 2009, I was involved in teaching at schools, and the UK government brought in this program, which was to be taken place at hundreds of schools throughout the UK. And this was a very unusual program. It was classed as a writing skills program, but they used real police officers with part of this, and real CSI guys, and they would go out to the playing fields of these junior schools. These are only very young students from 5 till 11, of age. And they would create a UFO crash. They build like a small
Heard
UFO.
about this. Yeah.
And a lot of effort and a lot of time went into this. Incident tents were put up, police officers were there, and the children were brought out, because I was part of that program. And they were taken over to a perimeter line around the craft. And there was some interesting talk to the students about the dangers that might be in association to something that's come down and crashed. And you could be, could be burnt, it could be found to be ill, there could be germs, it could be this, that. We're talking about chemical and biological hazards, of course. And how to report it to a responsible adult. What do you do if you see something like this? What's the process of who do you talk to? And then they take the children back into class and they ask them to write a story about UFOs and draw an alien. There was never any aliens seen, manufactured with these crafts, these small crafts that they used to build, make them look like they crashed into the ground. Of course, they dig up the ground and make it look realistic, and bits of smoke coming up and all sorts of things with CSI tape around, incident tape. But there was never any entities seen, or fake ones or something like that. They wanted it to leave it to the children's imagination when they asked, as part of the creative writing skills program, to draw an alien. And that all that information was collected, and looked at. And this went on over since 2007, I believe, till 2015 or something like that. And there was quite a lot of schools were visited, and it's real police officers and real CSI guys they used. So a lot of effort went into that, and I thought it was profoundly unusual because I actually had been part of one of those incidents that have been taking place at schools. I guess you'd heard some about those sort of things.
Oh yeah, I sure did when I was doing my research into these cases. And I found it interesting because,
It's
yeah,
very strange.
the
It's a lot of effort.
children, the poor things, are like, what's going on here?
Yeah,
But I'm encouraged by it because this was a subject that wasn't taught in schools.
no,
Uh, for me, it wasn't being portrayed in the media really at all. It was
no.
very fear-based when it was.
Well, I can't
Uh,
see it's the national curriculum in the UK was on there to that, students are informed about UFOs and aliens and things like that, into the work through creative skills, writing and art and things like that. But it was there, and it was a process that, yes, they were learning about it in school, and not just. I found that it was also taking place in Australia and maybe other places as well, in the schooling system. That it was.
I have to wonder about that because the schoolyard UFO thing there is a connection there. I found enough cases to absolutely cement this.
Yes,
And these are very unusual because these are very low level sightings. They're landing in one third of the cases. This is
yes,
almost always a daylight case. They will
yeah,
put on displays, release smaller craft. ETs are being seen. There's interaction. In fact, back in 1966, 2 weeks before Westall, Hillsdale College had an incident. And Jim and Coral Lorenzen said, you know what? We've had several schoolyard encounters. Raymond Fowler, very well-known researcher, said he had 15 cases as of March that year. 8 were at schoolyards.
wow,
So it's very clear. And I think the purpose, honestly, is just a sort of introduction. The ETs are coming down and introducing themselves to very young children because over half are primary schools, elementary schools,
yes,
over 50%. So
mm,
children of that age have no preconceptions. They don't, interpret these in any way. They don't even know the word UFO often in these cases. They'd never heard of it.
no,
So they have fear surrounding this. They're just reporting what they saw. And it's so interesting. Like the Broadhaven students still have
no.
yearly anniversaries to, basically commemorate what they saw. Uh,
That's right, and a lot of strange incidents happened at that time in Broadhaven. Multiple of various things were being seen. Rippleston Farm was one of those locations,
right.
which ties into those incidents at that time, and numerous other things that have been seen. And it was a kind of the Welsh Triangle incident sort of thing. And there was a lot of stuff going on back then. And the school was just one of those incidents as one part of a bigger picture.
Almost all these schoolyard incidents are not isolated events. They're usually part of a
Yeah,
conglomeration of sightings going on at that time.
yeah, fascinating, isn't it?
Not all of them, but certainly some.
Yeah. Now, being in the US, Preston, it's been an interesting last 12 months. A lot of talk about UFOs, all the new terminology, UAP, and the congressional hearings. Did you follow them? I was wondering what your take was on the UAP congressional hearings. I can tell you from the UK, a lot of people were a little disappointed that he expected it to go a bit more further, and it didn't seem to um, get as much as a punch as he expected. What do you think? What do you believe, Preston?
Well, I used to say I was on the fence. I'm not now. I'm on one side of the fence with it. I'm disappointed. I
Yeah,
don't think it's true disclosure. I don't like the term UAP. I think it's a distraction.
exactly.
I know that their excuse was we're trying to destigmatize the subject, but they're not doing that. This was all talk. This was no action. We know they have the evidence.
Yeah, yeah,
There's no doubt about it that they've got really good photographic evidence. And
yes,
to just, it's completely disingenuous. NASA saying we don't have evidence. Yes, you do. We know how many satellites surround this planet. We know they can see a postage stamp. So saying you don't have evidence is simply not credible. Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, I just can't see us getting disclosure then, really. I mean, even now, there's a great effort not to give it. It's just like it's another satisfactory process to keep the general public satisfied, and let's put on a show. Bit like Blue Book all over again. Let's put on a show when they know information, and yet they're not seemingly going to be sharing it with
The
us.
subject has really burst into the mainstream, though, because now
It
we do
has.
have
That's a
enough
good thing.
species.
Yeah.
It's undeniable. So they have to say something. If they don't, they're going to lose complete control of the narrative.
Yes.
They're going to
Yes.
become completely irrelevant and not credible. And they're there. Let's face it, nobody believes what the government has to say anymore because they're
Still,
demonstrably lying. The
we
only
still
real
got
good thing to come out of
researchers.
this
We still got
is that,
researchers, Preston. We still got researchers out there. I was talking
yeah,
to Steve Bassett the other day. Right, we're
yeah,
adamant, absolute adamant. We are on the verge of disclosure. And I just said, I don't know if that's going to happen. We can go back time and time again. If it wasn't for the Citizens Against Ufology movement, the disclosure program, and what was the other one that went on for a whole week? The Citizens Hearings Against Ufology, and here we are again. UAP congressional hearing. It's time after time after time, walking away empty-handed. You know,
our governments are never going to disclose. But let's face it, disclosure has happened.
yes,
There are, upwards of 1 million documented cases.
yes,
MUFON and Newfork alone have 250,000 documented reports. That's a lot. From 2 reporting services in the US alone, there's almost 200 countries. There's a lot of reports, enough to convince any open-minded person. If you're a closed-minded skeptic and you don't objectively examine the evidence, you can come away, oh, I don't believe it. But you're not being genuine. You're not doing your homework. Disclosure has happened. The evidence is there. And
yes,
while we would like a sitting head of state or government to say it's all real, and they have essentially said
yeah,
that there is validity to this phenomena,
yes,
but they're still sidestepping and waffling and doing
exactly.
everything they can to
Yeah,
sort of
it
slow
does
down the progress
always
of
seem that way, and I do believe. Do you think that when we look up into the skies and now we see some strange crafts flying around? I cannot help sort of look up and think, well, is it ours or theirs? Because I do
ours.
think
Yeah.
we've got some incredible technology ourselves. And I think it's become a problem now. Going back many years ago, we could have argued the point, well, no, we won't have had that technology by then. But nowadays, it's very, very problematic when we see a light in the sky or even a craft in the sky. I've seen some very good pieces of video footage with crafts that are flying at incredible speeds. But, it seems like technology suddenly plateaued out in the 1970s and everything kind of went black. And we're still having to spend 8.5 hours on a plane to travel from the UK to the US. you know, and it's still the same as it has been for a very, very long time. Where is all the advanced technology? So I think people are misidentifying things, but I don't think they care, Preston, because it's not a problem for them if people shout UFO. I think they become, to a point where they don't mind where they fly these things sometimes.
Yeah, well, this is one of the other reasons behind the UFO cover-up, because there is a suppression of technology. I think this has been pretty clearly proven.
Yes.
So it's really unfortunate because way back when I got involved in this field in the late 1980s, I was told by people in the know that at least 20% of what people are seeing is in fact reverse engineered. And that number I think is just going up, 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 up. And I'm again going to refer people to my book Symmetry, not to push the book, but just because Dolly Saffron talks about this. She says,
Mm.
listen, ETs have essentially left right now because our magnetic fields, and you can look this up, are very unstable.
Yes.
So pretty much what people are seeing now
You saw
is
the
reverse
red
engineered
skies,
craft.
in the UK we had the red aurora,
Right. I
incredible.
would really encourage people to look this up and look up what contactees are saying, because many contactees have gotten these messages about what is currently going on.
Mm.
So it behooves all of us to really do our research. Don't look to the government for answers. I've already said it, but
Uh,
it bears repeating.
They're
because
not
they're
going to. No, it's
uh,
just a,
the, if you want the truth about what is going on now and in the past, it's the contactees who have the information.
mm,
Not the
yes,
pundits on TV or scientists who haven't really done their research, but are just commenting.
yes.
It's infuriating when I hear some of the things very high level astronomers are saying who haven't talked to a single contactee. You're never going to hear a contactee go up before Congress.
No, never.
So,
It's a shame, really. Yeah, it is very one-sided. It's a very, there was even one part of the UAP congressional hearings when the topic of Roswell came up, and two officials there said, "What's Roswell?"
yeah, Moultrie and Daly. I'll never forget the looks on their faces.
Never.
Have we ever shot at a UFO? Oh, no, no, never. Have you ever heard of Malmstrom? We have no good reporting on that. I'm like, wait, aren't you the head of the Defense Department? Isn't
It
this
was.
a nuclear
It was
missile site?
embarrassing. It was really embarrassing. Yeah, and they didn't even make a great effort to make it even look like they made a mistake. It was just blatant. That. Oh yeah, we don't know.
One congressman who asked an intelligent question. Most of these congress people had not done their homework. It was
No.
clear.
But
So,
these children in school that know the Roswell incident.
yeah.
Especially in the UK. I mean, no stranger. I mean, you say Roswell to a child, they'll probably go, "No, that's a UFO thing." So, yeah, they'll kind of,
There's over 100 books on Roswell alone.
it's just
If you don't
crazy.
know about Roswell,
Yeah,
and you're,
I know.
I
I
mean,
know.
for people to say UFOs aren't real within government and government circles, I'm like, I've got a couple of books for you that I wrote. You can pick up any UFO book and learn more about this subject in a day than
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
from all these government folks.
Yeah, and I just think it's just ignorance, really. I think all they wanted to play ignorant or play daft that we don't know and that sort of thing, and that doesn't wash for me. This is aren't we dealing? These are the intelligence, isn't it? It's supposed to be dealing with the people who are in intelligence, and yet it doesn't seem to demonstrate any. That's what's
I
so
think at the
amusing.
very highest levels, they absolutely know. The highest levels of the military and certainly the intelligence
Exactly.
community take the subject extremely seriously
Yeah.
and pouring enormous amounts of our tax dollars, by the way,
Oh
into
yeah, yeah.
studying the
No
subject.
question as to
And
where that goes. I know that
they,
happens. That happens a lot. So what's next for you then, Preston? Have you got any other ideas of books being published, or are you working on anything at the moment?
always working on something, Steve.
Yeah,
No,
number 30.
another
It's
book.
going to be book 31 or something, or maybe I've lost count how many that you've done. I will be putting a full amount of descriptions out about the amount of books that you wrote, and I have to say, hat off to you that you've not took your foot off the pedal on this, because there is a huge amount of information, and you are right. It does get lost. It does need documenting. I've come across things and I thought to myself, why is not why can that, I mean, absolute gems. Why has it not been wrote about? Why has nobody wrote about it? And it's just been lost. And
Why I do this research. I'm going to put out a sequel to my book Symmetry about Dolly Saffron's experiences. That's next.
all
I'm
right.
doing some more paranormal stuff because that's again connected. More on, people who have direct encounters. I'm always working on something.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do a podcast with Dolly Saffron each Monday evening at
Yeah.
8 Eastern. So this is an important subject.
It
We
really-
all got to do our part. So I'm really glad that you're doing your part.
Well,
It's important.
there's a lot of
But
people that, I mean, in the UK, I don't know if you're aware, but you do have quite a considerable following in the UK, of your work, still in the books. And people have asked me, and I said I've not had the opportunity to be able to sit down and talk with Preston. Um, but I wanted to have that opportunity because people kept asking me about it. They wanted to know, I mean, other people can write books. There are people write books, and there are people that really do investigate, really do get involved. And of course, because you're involved in it, and the paranormal as well. It's not just one part, also. That I think people wanted to find out more about you and that. And I do know that you have your official YouTube channel, which I shall put a link in for people to view. And where did you obtain your books? Do you have your own website where you're actually putting the books on? Because I know that you have a lot of books on your website. You know, is it easier to go through the website for people to want to purchase books from you, Preston, or do you just basically, go off to Amazon or places like that?
You can certainly buy them at online retailers like Amazon or Barnes and Noble. But if you go to my
Right.
website, I do have excerpts there, and you can learn a lot more about the books.
Yes, yeah, it's
Own
extensive.
research.
All that. That's a lot of work that you've done into that website. It's getting bigger and bigger all the time, of course. You know, I'll be putting links in for people because I know a number of people have asked me about books. And do you do regular podcasts? Are you on any specific ones you do regularly, or is it just you just
Yeah,
do?
I do the Light Gate each Monday evening, as I mentioned, with Dolly Saffron from
Right,
8 to 10
right,
Eastern time.
Eastern time. Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
well, we're moving to
five
that time in
hours.
July, so
Yes, that's a 5 hour difference from Eastern time. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so
so
we'll put those details out, Preston. So unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show and we've run out of room for any other discussions about, and we could go on forever because I know you've been involved for such a long time and covering so many different subjects. Very similar to me because I started in the paranormal, I was the other way around, paranormal to ufology, and some people use ufology to paranormal, but I've kind of equally been involved in both aspects, encrypted phenomena, some ancient research, then I got interested in space mystery, and you end up 360, don't you? Anything is all interesting, all anything anomalous, I would say. And I think that's probably the same for you, considering the amount of books that you've wrote on the various different subjects, which is
there's a
which
lot to it. Yeah.
there really is, and there's still a certain amount of work there's still so much more that can be done. It's endless, and nobody can ever think that they might be able to put a dent in it. I don't think I will. I can spend a lifetime in this, and though that we all attribute a brick in the wall, I suppose, which is good. And like you said, it has been interesting times over the last 12 months. It's no longer the elephant in the room discussion now when you talk about UFOs, because at least we can say, well, do you know what? The Pentagon said they're real, and at least we got those things, so it's not so much a taboo subject. It's where we go from now, and how long will it be before we start to get some proper recognition, or maybe we might not for a very long time. Who knows? But I want to thank you for coming on the show, Preston, and I'll be putting the links out on underneath when the video goes out, so people can find out more about you, visit your website, your YouTube channel, and where to obtain your books from. So thank you again for coming on the show, The Big Picture, Preston, and hopefully we'll keep in touch soon.
I would like that. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.